Stagnant, outdated, solved, ruined. These are adjectives detractors use to describe the DMTCG. I suppose when you look at the facts, it's easy to see how people have arrived at that conclusion. Yes, the OCG is richer, more vibrant, alive, etc., but it's not the game many of us fell in love with. In fact, one could reasonably argue that the OCG has evolved so much, it's hardly the same game as the TCG anymore. So, my fellow enthusiasts who grow wary of the TCG's limitations, here are 3 ideas on how to spice up our game without letting it spiral out of control. The first and probably most obvious idea is to incorporate the DMP exclusive cards. One of the most attractive qualities of DMP to us was that it largely focused on cards available in the TCG. It played to our nostalgia by placing emphasis on cards we were familiar with, but it also introduced some much appreciated balance changes. It also brought a handful of OCG exclusive cards to the table. There weren't too many of them and their effects perfectly tied in with the TCG environment, which to us was a huge win. Bringing in these DMP exclusive into a TCG environment will also provide the chance to play with new favorites in a different setting. With regards to whether or not you include the changes to existing card text like Scarlet Skyterror doubling in power and getting double breaker, or removing Pekotan's draw condition, it's up to you. If it were me, I'd first ignore the balance changes to cards available in local text, but bring the Japanese exclusives in their DMP form, as these will feel most natural, and then experiment from there. The next idea is to incorporate DM13. For those of you who don't know, the OCG very clearly segmented their expansions into blocks. DMs 1 to 5 comprise what I consider as the base set block. This obviously introduced most staple mechanics and laid the foundation for how the game was to be played. DMs 6 to 9, as the names would suggest, comprised the invincible block, which saw the game play around with more devastating effects as they tried to increase power levels. Finally, DMs 10 to 13 comprised the Eternal block, which introduced multi-civ cards. As you all know, the TCG ended at DM 12, but I'm a firm believer that the TCG was meant to see DM 13, and Wizards of the Coast just pulled the plug early. Because DM 13 is in the same block as the sets we already play with, I believe it is possible to include DM 13 in a TCG setting without completely disrupting the ecosystem. After a quick scan, I found some cool cards to play with like Galamuta and Pacific Champion, but I don't think there is anything overly centralizing or excessively broken. Plus, the sympathy mechanic and new multi-civ combinations could add some much needed variety. So why no DM14 and onwards, you may ask? Well, DM14 is the first set in a new block, which introduces the cross-gear card type, so I feel like the game strays too far at that point. The last idea is to police the format by introducing a ban list. The OCG has one in the form of the Hall of Fame, and the community on DM Reborn also have a recommended ban list, which places restrictions on how many copies of a certain card you can run in a deck. So far, these counts range from 0 to 2. Now you might be thinking, wait, how is reducing the number of available cards meant to make the game more interesting? Well, one of the biggest complaints people have with the TCG is the stranglehold some cards have over the meta. Cards like Corile, Cranium Clamp, and Bombazar immediately come to mind when the notion of oppressive cards comes up. These cards, among others I'm sure, can invalidate a lot of otherwise decent strategies. So by policing the format, you might actually find that the game becomes a lot more fun because of the archetypal variety it gives rise to. So there you have it, 3 separate ideas on how to spice up the DMTCG. We personally haven't tried them yet since we're quite content with the TCG for the time being, although I'd be lying if I said I hadn't fantasized about playing Illusionary Merfolk with Emerald, Corile, and Pekotan. But yeah, I encourage you guys to try out some of these if you find the TCG growing a little stale. Heck, you might even want to try some combinations of the above. Always remember though that at the end of the day, there isn't really a right way to play, so you should just play in a way that lets you have the most fun. That brings us to the end of the video, and as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.